So did you know that Gen Z is going to be taking up about 30% of the workforce in the next few years? And it also happens to be the demographic that a lot of employers tend to struggle with. So on this episode, we're going to get into everything related to Gen Z. And at the end of everything, we're also going to be sharing a link where you can get your 3-phase playbook on how to hire Gen Z and get amazing, productive employees.
So we're talking about hiring, training, and motivating everybody's favorite demographic, Gen Z. Dude, I don't know about you, but talking to a ton of business owners, this has been one of the biggest frustrations is how do I work with Gen Z? They're so challenging. They're so difficult. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. But, it's really interesting because I've worked with that demographic a ton. And I used to love hiring people right out of college because, they don't have any bad habits necessarily. If you hire a provider or a doctor who's been in the field for X amount of years, they have their ways of doing it. So I always loved working with the younger generation, but I can definitely understand why people don't. It's really interesting because a lot of people now are just saying, well, I'm just not going to hire them. But then when you look at, all right, what's the percentage of the population? And I think by, another 4 years or so, Gen Z is going to make up essentially 30% of the hiring population.
Right.
So, essentially you're saying then, well, I'm basically eliminating 30% of the workforce. And then you throw in the fact that, most of us know that how many baby boomers are moving out. So you have that older generation going out of the workforce. And now you're saying, well, I'm not going to hire the younger generation either. So it's really, number one, is how do I can't avoid it. Can't put your head in the sand.
So the first thing is what is Gen Z, right? So it's short for Generation Z, and it refers to people that are born between 1997 and 2012. Right, so that space and time, and they are the first generation, because it certainly wasn't for you and certainly wasn't for me, that they grew up fully in the digital age. That's Gen Z. So meaning smartphone, social media, instant access to information, have shaped how they think, communicate, and make decisions. I remember back in the day, if I wanted information, I would have to go walk to the library and literally sift through things.
Well, Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah. Zoo books. I used to get into all that. Reading Rainbow, where it was the way that you consume and get information is you got to go find books. Yeah. You got to go be proactive and talk to people and pick their brains. And that's for us as a millennial. So Gen Z, it's they don't. It's instant, quick gratification. So let me give you a couple other really quick things around Gen Z. Some of the core traits around them is that they're fast, they're skeptical, they're self-taught, they tend to trust creators more than brands. They need more authenticity and social proof in order for them to take action on things. They value transparency, individuality. And for them, I think one of the gripes too is that they're a little too casual, and they're kind of their social skills are
terrible, and they're entitled. That's definitely the common feedback.
Yeah, of what people are saying is they believe these certain things, and you're like, man, because our generation of being millennials, and then our parents, it's just we're kind of, they're almost like our little brother. Because I have a sister that's also Gen Z. We're 14 years apart, and the way that she is wildly different.
Yeah, millennials the best. But yeah, no, at the end of the day, it's you're looking at what's the differences to your point. And this is where you like to be fair to people if you understand them, right? It's to your point. Oh, they don't have any social skills. All right, why not? Well, because again, like you said, they grew up. Here's your info. It's your computer. It's an iPad. You haven't interacted. Yeah, you're not interacting with people as much, so they didn't get a chance to actually develop those skills. So that's one aspect. But then when you're looking at, this, I love looking at these engagement studies. Gallup, big work organization, how many employees are actually fully motivated, and it's not great, overall in the U.S. especially. But you look at Gen Z, and they're at about 31%. So essentially, 3 out of 10. Gen Z employees are fully invested in their work, right? And another 50% are just kind of going through the motions. Yeah,
it definitely feels like our parents, kind of the baby boomers, they are they don't care if their job is fulfilling. It's a job, it's a duty. You get in and you get out, and shut up about complaining. I don't care about your fulfillment. I don't care about your mental health. Do the fucking work and get out of my face. So that's our parents on
100%.
us. Yeah. And so I think there's a couple of elements of that with us, but I think, you know, also being millennials is like we do care about having fun and having impact, but we can get down and dirty and actually do the work too as well. And then it feels like with Gen Z, it's complete fulfillment. It's like, I need to make sure that this is impacting the world in the right way. And it's a little bit more of that. Not everybody, but
no, there's part of that. But you also, you know, you also mentioned the skepticism, you know, of like, I don't really trust the business, but I think also, and this is one aspect where social media has, I don't know if it's helped or hurt, but definitely informed people in terms of the decision making, is you see how many people have been promoted in companies to a manager position, director position, right? And that used to be the gold standard if you're an employee, management. But then you hear how many stories of, well, I got promoted, but all it really was more hours and more responsibilities and very little pay. So now they see that, and they see enough people on TikTok and Instagram with that life story. And why would I want to do that? Why would I want to work harder to be promoted when it just means more hours with like no pay? So for them, that skepticism, like, I don't trust you. I don't trust that you're not going to screw me over. I don't trust that even if you have a signed contract in my interview, that you're not going to find some loophole to not pay me for my bonus.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a far more freedom that they value, that they have, that they want more autonomy. And so if they're taking on a role that might you know, pay them a little bit more, but it's impacting their mental health, right? Like something that they track themselves is like, do I feel more stressed? Am I sleeping easier, better? Am I able to kind of shut off my mind? So they're kind of a little bit more mental health focused in a lot of ways. And I think the pandemic influenced a lot of people like that too. It was like, that was very public facing. That was like very forward. So if they are getting into a role where it's like, yeah, a little bit more money, but I kind of value my freedom more and I'll get by, I think more of that happens. And it's probably one of the reasons why Gen Z is not wanting to take on manager roles. Like, this is my job. Give me a clear environment. What are my do's and don'ts, and kind of leave me alone is a big one.
Yeah. You know, and you brought up the pandemic, and I mean, we all lived through it, but we all have very different experiences. You know, I wasn't shut off from society. You know, I mean, I went to work because I was still open. But if you're basically home all day, you can't see your friends in person, and you're basically just isolated to your house, that messes with you. You know, and I don't think people really fully understand. And I don't know, man, I think you probably know this better than I do, but isn't like our brain's still developing up until 25?
Especially with men. Men, it is 25. With women, it's a little bit younger.
Yeah, so there's that aspect. So then you have people who are 18, 19, 20 at that point, living by themselves, isolated. That's going to have some kind of
staring at a screen, no less. Like, 'cause a lot of them are really much on social media, and I think there was a couple of class action lawsuits against some platforms because they are specifically designed to create addictions.
Get out of here, really?
Yeah, just to make addictions. And so that is like an addiction. Like when you're looking at people that are addicted to cocaine or to pornography or to drinking or to just anything, like what it does to the brain is absolutely horrible. And that's just the addiction part. That's not even including the blue light going in, because it disrupts hormones and it disrupts all kinds of things, your circadian rhythm. Yeah. And this generation, like our little brothers and sisters, they're getting hit with that more than any other time in human history. Yeah.
So now you think about that, if you even think about that, and it's like, all right, well,
they should think about it. Yeah.
What would that do to me, right? And then we talk about, you mentioned purpose over paycheck, work-life integration, right? Because at the end of the day, too, it's just that mentality. Like, I love my mom to death, but she has that older person, and she's 70. You just get a job and work for 45 years straight, and then you get to enjoy it at the end. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? What kind of life is that? Like, if you can make it that far, if you don't drop dead before then, or if you don't end up broke before then. So the same thing, too. It's like, why am I going to wait till I'm 70 to enjoy life? Why can't I enjoy life now? Which I totally get, man. And then that aspect of being, skeptical, and this is where I think a lot of companies get it wrong. And we'll kind of dive into this a little bit more, but they're looking for some transparency, which I don't know, like for me, if you can't tell people what is going on in the company, that just tells me you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing anyway, right?
Yeah. So if we think back on like baby boomer consumer etiquette and intelligence, it's way different than today. Like the consumers today are far more savvy. Like they just on someone's algorithm, they can be looking at Jeremy Lee Minor and how he does sales, and then like Grant Cardone, and then like something else, and you see there's so much social media and so much information out there of like brands and positioning and colors and aesthetic and everything. So they are very savvy on really a lot of different things. And so when someone is trying to kind of pull the wool over their eyes because they're a little old school, that employee is like, I'm a little distrusting. And one of the things that they would love from employers, especially healthcare employers, is having like mission clarity. Like, it is what I'm doing impacting the community, the globe? How are we different from other people? Tangible growth paths, career pathing, where they can see like, all right, if I get to here, and I can actually almost gamify my career. Like, that's a big one too. And then, and just a couple other things too, where I think that they also just want, like what we mentioned, like a little bit more autonomy of like, I don't want to be micromanaged, because that just goes back to them feeling like, man, you're infringing on my freedom as a person.
I will say there's, you talked about generational differences, right? And you think about that in terms of how you manage people. It's, if you're in that Gen X, past 44 age, give or take, you kind of just, look, I'm being honest, this is the way I'd love to just manage people, is just tell them what to do. It's like, hey, just do this, and not have to explain, this is why we're doing this. But that's what they're looking for. Is like, all right, I don't mind doing the job. I just want to know why I'm doing it. And that's what gets some business owners like, why do they ask me so many questions? Like, they just want to know, dude. Like, I get it slows you down a little bit. But this is why I say, like, I really appreciated that aspect of Gen Z, and that's the part that one of the major parts that pisses a lot of people off is the questions. I'm like, you know what? You're actually making me have to be a better communicator, which I really appreciate. And to your point about even mission, vision, and what's the big picture of what we're actually doing here for the community, which, healthcare should be a big tenet of that. It's like, you're actually helping me stay focused on how do we make sure we're actually delivering on that message, and we're not losing sight of it, especially which is, we're getting hammered by insurance. So let's just see more patients to make up the difference. Like, all right, we're getting away from our core message as to what we're trying to do here. And I appreciate you guys kind of anchoring me back.
Yeah, and I do think it's also a shift that's happening. I mean, you look at books like Simon Sinek's Start With Why, where that's like that is the place to begin. Like, why am I doing this? And you kind of work your way backwards. And I think that, if you're thinking about a book that's like very Gen Z, it's kind of that one in a lot of ways. And it's also like one of those business books, or it's not really a business book, but it kind of is that when you're a business leader and you're looking at that and you're trying to architect your life and architect your business, like, why are we doing this? And you have someone that's asking about that. Those are kind of things at this point in time in 2026 where you should have off the cuff. You should not be upset that someone else is asking you that. Just as any different, like back, 40 years ago, the questions were quite different. Yeah. So it's just adapting to the times, knowing that like, yeah, you have a group of people that are coming in, and where it starts really is identifying really the right candidate. And so it's identify.
Yeah. So when we talk about, the first part of bringing in candidates, what are some things that we can, or a business can do in terms of, all right, I want to bring in the right people, because that's always the $1 million question anyways. How do I get the right candidate in? What are some things we can do from a standpoint of specifically gearing that process for Gen Z?
Cool. So it's a couple of things. When you're trying to find someone for a particular role, where are they living and how are they consuming things? If you look at some platforms like Monster back in the day, or even Indeed, that's where a lot of people would go. But now you're seeing kind of Facebook, but where people are posting on Facebook or on like groups, like if someone's looking for sales guys, there's groups for that. Roofers, there's groups for that. Marketing agents, there's groups for call centers, right, or groups for that, where you can go in and you can just literally put a job posting inside of those groups, and they're flooded. So sometimes it is going to social media, it is going on TikTok, it is going on LinkedIn, and those places are they're really gaining because you're able to see through someone's social media. Like now people, part of the hiring process is like, okay, what's your CV? What's your background? What's everything? What's your interview? And then what are your socials? And they need to research to make sure that they're not like, because there's a political thing even now too, where you can have some people that are very vocal left or right that is not in alignment with the business. And so they push someone off because of those socials.
Yeah, and to be fair, you also want to post where they're hanging out, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So where are they seeing it where they can, and that is like the TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, even people find really good workers just through Snapchat. And it depends on what your business is, but where are they living and how they're consuming that? That's one.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And then I think the other aspect too is what are they saying in an interview to help you get a good sense of the person you're talking to. I know it's hard to do this in healthcare, but you see people who are maybe they're doing virtual meetings, right? It's just I'm going to sit and have Claude or ChatGPT open, and you ask me a question, I'm just going to type in and see what kind of response to give them. But I think the bigger thing too is what are they asking? What are they talking about? What is the employee asking about? Are they talking about what's the growth? You talk about that a lot. What's the growth trajectory like? What's the impact that we have on patients? And they just overall they're asking questions that relate to the culture. Those are I always appreciated when a prospective employee would ask questions, and I would actually not raise a red flag for me if they didn't have any questions, but it just gave me a little hesitation. It's like, you don't have anything, like you don't.
Yeah. So what Gen Z is more likely to ask you about. So like you have other generations and other cultures where it's like, okay, I get the job. What's the pay? Okay, it's this. It meets my standards. All right, I'm going for it. And so don't be surprised if Gen Z is asking you more about culture. Like describe the culture. Like what am I walking into? What's the growth trajectory look like? So like in healthcare, like what's the patient impact? Like how are we monitoring that? There's a higher likelihood that Gen Z is asking those types of questions. And for some HR people or some leaders, that might be annoying. But that is a cue that you need to take that they're interested, that they're asking about those things, which is a positive. And more of a red flag is if they are, if they're giving you a lot of surface level stuff, they have an inability to articulate why they're even there, like what kind of impact they want to.
Why'd you even get into healthcare?
Why did you get into healthcare? Why'd you get into healthcare? And they're like, I don't know, just because my parents told me to. You're like, oh, right. They're gonna be in and out. But a couple of good interview questions that maybe you want to ask Gen Z is like, describe a time you disagreed with a supervisor, and what did you do? Describe it, right? What does work-life balance look to you in a clinical setting? So that's a really good one because they can say, like, I work 1 hour and I make $100,000 a year, and then I do this.
Like I check out probably at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, you're trying to look for like work ethic, and how much effort they need to put in to get to potentially a minimum, and how do you want to grow here in the next like 18 months?
See, I like that one because it sounds silly when you say it at first. So I'm like, why are you asking me how I want to grow here? But I think that's also, for me at least, I put that as
their career.
It requires active participation, right? It's just, well, you guys train me. If I show up and I bust my ass, doesn't that mean I grow? It's, how do you actively want to do this too, right? Because it is, you talk a lot this about on prior episodes about coachability. You're willing to listen to teachers. Like, all right, what are you doing outside of just the formal instruction here? And then I think another question that at least I get is just structured interviews versus conversational interviews. I think ultimately it really just comes down to is what can you ask the person that gives you an insight into who they actually are, right? So to your point, it's like, all right, what scenarios, or if we know, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that they're not great with their communication skills, and that's across the board. It has nothing to do with healthcare. It's just across the board. They're terrible typically at how to actually communicate. They have a hard enough time even staring somebody in the face because it's awkward for them. So it's, all right, what kind of scenarios have played out? And then can I ask them questions about those scenarios, right? Can I ask them questions that I'm looking for how they were empathetic with a patient, or if they just graduated college, because that's one like, well, I've never been in a clinical setting. I just graduated. It's like, all right, well, you did internships. So let's talk about, what happened there. You had to do that there. So how did you talk to a patient who was not motivated and didn't want to come in for treatment, or how did you get them back engaged? How did you explain a difficult diagnosis to a person? Stuff like, all right, now they can't fake that. They can't go on ChatGPT and like, all right, how would I answer this? I got to be truthful about it. So, conversational or structured, you just got to be able to ask questions that speak to the scenarios that are going to happen, over time. And then in reality, what kind of experience are you creating for the candidate? Is it, very sloppy process to even get them through the door? Is it, I forgot to send you the email with your DISC assessment or your personality test, or did I rush the interview process? Did I have you come back 8 times when maybe twice would have been enough. So I think you guys got to just factor that stuff in too, because we talked on a prior episode about bad experiences that people have, and then going out and leaving testimonials on social media, so to speak. They do the same thing, even just leaving a job interview. It's like, this place sucks, or I drove an hour and they spent 5 minutes with me, or I didn't even meet the owner, or whatever it is. So you lost them right away. So that's another thing I would just kind of throw in there. And then one of the biggest aspects, and this is huge in healthcare, man, is we mentor all new employees. Like, that's just like a throwaway phrase now that organizations use as a way to entice people, and it's just like, that doesn't matter anymore. Like, every organization basically does that, or at least every organization say they do it. So there is this aspect. I feel like, all right, we did a great job interviewing with them. We identified Antonio is the person. That's the candidate that we want. What do you do after that, right?
Oh, it's all about onboarding, because it's no different like if you're dating somebody and you're like, all right, let's do this, let's give it a fair shake, and then all of a sudden you drop her like a brick.
Yes,
that's not going to work. Like,
whoever does that.
Yeah, so you want to continue that relationship and doing touch points. So like making sure that you're even just a simple like 90-day onboarding window, that you know exactly what's happening week 1 through week 7. And so what's better with Gen Z is, instead of having marathon training, doing more like micro learning, like short visual on demand content. Yes. Beats like all day classrooms for them specifically. And I think it's just because like that's kind of how they're wired a little bit more, like the content that they consume being completely inside of the digital age, that being there for like 7 hours just staring at a screen,
but
thinking
quick hitters though.
Yeah, it's not gonna land. And as an employer, you want to put people in a position where they can absorb information and then execute on that information because it's internalized. And doing that marathon training with them is probably not going to be the best. So I would restructure things where it's like micro learning, in and out application. That's going to help Gen Z actually much, much better.
I'm like, keeping it to myself, the laughter, but I'm trying to hold the laughter because a lot of the feedback is they're so distracted, right? They can't even keep their focus. But then to your point, it's, hey, let's get a marathon learning session. Like, why would you even expect them to?
They're not going to be there.
Yeah, they're not built that way. So a lot of that too is, like you said, the social media, the scrolling. It's quick. All right, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, which doesn't mean you train them for 6 seconds, but it's all right. If I normally train somebody and we sit down for an hour, all right, maybe we'll do 20 minutes or maybe we'll do 30 minutes. The biggest thing is also understanding is, are they even retaining the information, right? So one thing that we you see this in, there's what's it called? There's an approach in physical therapy called a Maitland approach, but I loved it because it was a real simple thing, which is test and then retest. So it's like you test them, you see where they're maybe dysfunctional with their movements or whatever, and then you do your work with them, you do a session with them, and then you retest them again to see, did I actually do anything? Like, did you improve? Did your movement get better? So that's the way I like to do when we're training too. It's like, all right, I gave them a micro session, we taught them, blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, did you go back and then retest them to see if did it, hit, or did you just keep moving on and now they're lost?
Yeah. So just to kind of button up on this section, like there's a, like you see this again, like in construction where someone like shadows, like on the job training, like they're shadowing somebody. And then also with Gen Z, I would recommend having like a feedback cadence that's weekly, at least for the first part. Yeah. So like having touch points of how's everything going, how you feeling, you grasping on things, and it ends up being like far more conversational. So don't all of a sudden do like an annual review or like hire them and don't talk to them until the end of the probationary period. Have it in there where they can express themselves. Gen Z is more of an expressive demographic.
I'm going to cut in for 1 second there. If you're a small organization, there's no reason you can't even just do daily, right? I know some people want to pretend they're a company the size of Google, and then they got 20 employees. They're like, bro, just go talk to them, would you? Like, they're right there. It's no reason you got to even send an email or just say, meet me on Friday. You're literally right there. Just go check in on them.
Right. And so I would say like that's a good one. Give them an opportunity to feel heard. Is a big one. And so if we're not creating an environment that they can actually talk, like, oh, I wasn't getting this, or they can ask questions, then that invisible type feeling is what is a major deterrent for Gen Z.
I will say too, we talk about what do we train them on in those 90 days, right? So if you're you're in healthcare and it's, well, I taught them, how to use my electronic health record system.
It just depends on the role.
The culture, stuff related to their job. But then what you're starting to see in corporate America that it's one of the things that they're actually doing pretty well that I do believe smaller organizations would benefit from is actually carving out, all right, can we do some soft skills training? Can we actually train them on, if we know that they stink with their communication and we know that they're not great with their empathy, and it's not just us saying that, right? I mean, we even spoke to the dean over at UNLV Medical School, and he said the same thing. Like, their empathy's poor, and the communication skills are lacking. So outside of just training them on the technical skills of their job, can you guys carve out some time to actually train them on those soft skills that are going to be so crucial to helping them get better, but also it's part of actually the patient care. So you're helping the patient care get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an area where kind of everyone else says, like, this is one of the Gen Z's weaknesses is communication. So if it makes them that much more formidable of just learning some communication skills, that'd be really awesome. So there's that training side. And then at that point, it's about motivation and retention.
Yeah,
right?
No doubt.
So there's things that are kind of beyond the paycheck when you're talking with like Gen Z.
Oh, man.
For some people, like, it is bottom line paycheck. I just care about what's going into my account. Fuck everything else. I really don't give a shit. But there are some, especially like in healthcare, there's usually pretty robust, depends on the organization, benefits packages.
Yeah.
And so part of this is like, encouraging them to use all of the benefits, mental health, also like student loan assistance, talking to them even about ways of them being more autonomous, learning about like what are some systems or softwares or AIs that could be helpful and kind of getting their opinion.
Yeah.
When you talk to someone, I'm not saying that they're lazy. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that, like, if they can find a way to do it easier, quicker, and faster, and they're more hip and kind of in the know of different things that they can use, I would ask them.
It's 100%, dude. And to your point about beyond the paycheck, obviously when it's money's important, right? And if you're living in certain states, it's more important than others. California's, New Jersey's of the world, versus say if living in the South. But at the end of the day,
Alabama.
Yeah, like Alabama, Mississippi, not a big deal. But at the end of the day, money's still important. But the older demographics, that's the most important thing. Like, that's their prime directive is make money, provide for the family. And I love hearing the feedback, like, I don't understand. I offer them more money, or I have a bonus structure in place and they're not even working towards it. It's just like, dude, they don't care that much about the money as you do. So that's why they're not motivated by it. It's still important for them, but that's not their prime thing that they're looking at. So for you, you're like, well, what can we maybe pay for? And I'll give you like two quick examples is, there was this physical therapist that I worked with, and he wanted to get this. I talked to him about getting this crazy intense certification for balance and the vestibular system in the ears for concussions and whatnot. And it was costly. I think it was like about $3,700. You had to go to Atlanta to do it. And I talked to the company. The company paid for him. Or there was another physical therapist who wanted to become certified orthopedic specialist, like basically a board certified orthopedic physical therapist. And the same thing, the company paid for him for that. So this is the kind of stuff you're talking about is, all right, it doesn't always have to be direct paycheck, but what are you interested in doing for yourself to develop that's also going to add value to the company that maybe I can just pay for that instead? And they would look at that and say, oh my God, that was so generous, versus I could just, give you a bonus. Like, it's not the same, So to your point, it's like, all right, it's not just about salary, but it's like, how are you actually helping me grow? Because again, like, we're in healthcare, there's not that much flexibility you can have scheduling. I mean, you can certainly, if you're a medical doctor, this is something we're starting to see, being able to carve out a day of maybe just telemedicine where they can do it from home. So there is stuff like that where it's, all right, that's still a value add to the clinic. It's a value add to patients who either can't get to the office, or maybe they're just too busy and they don't have the time to do it. So there's little things like that, and even being able to say, all right, maybe I'll give you 2 hours or, 1/2 day off to catch up on notes. So there are things like that can still help an organization, but really substantially help the employee. And then when we're talking about, you brought up multiple times, which I really appreciate, is just that, what's my purpose here? Like, how am I really part of something that's actually beneficial? But then how do I become a bigger part of that? Meaning, how do I grow within the organization? What does growth actually look like? And that's again, we go back to the beginning of the episode where a lot of these younger employees, they don't want management. They don't want to climb that ladder like previous generations had. And that's where some of the challenges for owners are the saying, well, then what do I do with them? If there's no growth and they're doing the same thing over and over again, but then they still want more money. Right? Like, well, that is definitely a challenge. But at least for me, and like, I'd be curious on what you think. For me, it's just how do you can still give them more money, but how do you just put them in a position, so to speak, where they're a de facto leader, but they don't have like those full leaders. They don't have a title, and they don't have full responsibility. Like, people will undertake responsibilities. I just think it's the titles that scare the shit out of them, right? It's like, oh shit, if I'm the manager or the director, even if it's of a small department, it's like, I'm the guy. Versus the mindset shifts when it's just, all right, I'm going to have you do these extra things, but we're going to compensate you for it, and then you're not going to get a title. I just think, all right, thank God, like, I don't have the responsibility on me.
So I think I know what you're trying to ask. I think no matter what, when we're assigning like meaning and responsibility to something, it's important to make sure that you're informing that the person is valuable, and that their decisions and their presence and what they do is really important to the team. And I think this is kind of a human thing where you're kind of telling someone like, you're talented here. You move the needle. People listen to you. And I want to place you into this position, or I want to place you into a spot into the business where you have more impact, because like you do show that you care. I would not want someone in that role if they did not care. They didn't see the big picture. They, they didn't see big picture, that they're not empathetic, and they don't understand, but you do. And so you have all of the characteristics and qualities to actually do this and really help guide people.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you're positioning some stuff that way with Gen Z, you're kind of acknowledging the stuff that they care about, and that they have an opportunity to have a ripple effect for the rest of the organization of them being themselves. Yeah. And as long as it's guided in that direction. So I think that's what's more important. And I think at the end of the day, when you're thinking about Gen Z, they do want to have more impact. They want to have a clear game plan. They don't care about the same stuff as maybe our parents did, or even we do. It doesn't mean they're going to be a bad employee. It just means you have to kind of communicate in a different way, where now what you're positioning in front of them is, well, first off, it's true. You're not lying to anybody. It's truthful, and it allows them to basically grow and showcase the thing that you are admiring from them, which is that empathy, which is that, all that other stuff. So I feel like when you have that plus a roadmap for them, I think it's easier for them to slip into.
Yeah. The last few things I would mention would be, psychological safety is big, but just feel like, what does that mean? It's just basically, you want to create an environment where they can make mistakes, and you're not, chewing them out. You're not biting their head off. So you have the kind of environment where, hey, look, we all make mistakes. The bigger thing is learning from them, so we don't make the same ones over and over again. We're all humans. And even the best of the best make mistakes. And then how do you give them some recognition? So essentially, how do you demonstrate some gratitude for them? Big ones, I got to just tell them thank you for doing their job. But then I always flip it back to people, which is, all right, how many employees do you complain about who don't do their job? So if you want to reward the behavior you want to see, and I used to think that all the time, like, what the fuck do I gotta say thank you for? You're doing your job. But then again, I was bitching about how many people didn't do their job. So it's, all right, how much effort does it actually just take to say, hey, Antonio, thanks, man. I appreciate the effort. Great job. 2 seconds. And then lastly, at least for me anyway, would be how to, if you're not the one directly, work with them, if you do have a manager, you do have a director, it's understanding how to train the managers and directors to work with them as well, right? Because to your point, yes, money is still the second biggest reason employees quit. Management and leadership is number one. So if they're not connected to the managers or the directors of the organization, they're bolting. So it doesn't matter how good you are as the owner or CEO, whatever it is, if the people directly working with them don't know how to communicate with them and effectively motivate them, you're basically just going to waste more money on hiring their replacement. So It's making sure that those people, the trainers of the trainers, you got to get them on point as well.
Yeah. So if someone is listening to this and they feel like, okay, I think might be a little bit of a disconnect with my team, or rather, like, you have a business where, like, hey, I'm looking to scale and grow, and one of the key things that I'm going to have to do is hire a ton of kind of maybe more entry level staff members. What kind of audit or what would you suggest that they would do if they are on the cusp of doing that?
Say that one more time for me, actually.
If you have a business owner that is like, especially in healthcare, that they're looking to scale, looking to grow, looking to hire more Gen Z, what are some things that they can do as far as connecting with us to get an audit and see how they're structured currently?
Oh, I mean, honestly, like number one, it's always just obviously, easy enough just to hop on a call. But, in reality, part of it too is looking at some data. But the biggest thing to know, am I doing a good job? Are people getting better? I think that was one thing back in the day, was just people weren't progressing. So employees getting better, is employee retention where it needs to be. And if you're just like, I don't even know what my employee retention is, that's where I would say getting data, number one, is very important. So, but people, I think the last few years got a little obsessed with surveys, employee surveys. So it's not really giving you the full information. So that's where I like to have somebody who's not the owner, somebody who's not the manager, able to talk to employees, because they do let their guard down. They do feel a little bit safer there to give some free feedback about this is what's great in this organization and this is what's struggling. That's why I'm always a big fan of just, hey, bringing somebody, even if it's just one time, or hire somebody like us to come in and just demonstrate, all right, this is where we're having some challenges, or this is what the staff's telling us. And then you can create a roadmap of, all right, what do we have to do to actually correct it? Because like we said at the beginning of the episode, if 30% of the workforce is going to be Gen Z, you got to know this stuff. You have to know, there are great employees out there. And that's one thing I want to they're all this. No, they're not. Those are bullshit stories you tell yourself. There's great young employees, because I've worked with a ton of them, that are out there, that are motivated, that work really freaking hard. So you got to start with your interview process. And that's why even that, I feel like I don't even know what my interview process looks like. We can help you with that.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah. So book a call. See you guys there.